I have 5 minutes until my PhD Viva. But how did I get to that point and what happened next? I warn you now, this video is long and rambling and unscripted. It's probably the sort of video that you're going to want to put on in the background whilst you're doing other things. But how did I prepare for my Viva, and did I pass? Let's find out. How's it going, folks? It's me, Liam, aka Mr. Knight, aka DystopiaJunkie, and I have 18 days until my PhD Viva. If you don't know what that is or why that's so important, I do recommend you check out the linked video up in the little card thing up here at the top, in which I explain sort of what it means to hand in a PhD thesis and what happens next. Now, of course, as with probably every PhD student, the Viva is something that is a bit daunting and a bit scary for me, but it's also something I've been thinking about for quite a long time. You know, it's something that you know will happen at the end of the PhD. Definitely since the end of January 2024, it's something that's been a bit more at the forefront of my mind. Well, I've now had some sort of work stuff and life stuff sort of come and go and sort of pass. And so I now have a clearer headspace, really, in order to be more able or better able to prepare for the Viva. So I'm going to spend some time today, I think, sort of doing some research basically, and sort of seeing what people say you should do in order to prepare for your Viva. And then I'm going to use that to draw up a bit of a revision sort of timetable, I guess, schedule, calendar, whatever you want to call it, counting down from today, day 18, all the way down to day 0, my Viva itself. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I guess I'll do a quick time lapse to show you what's going on there, and then I'll offer some reflections at the end of that process. So here I am doing that research. In the end, I read about a dozen sources, including web pages and blogs, emails from friends, and even a podcast. A handful of themes emerged throughout these sources. I need to know my thesis inside out, have an explanation for every single choice made inside and around it, and be prepared to reflect, justify, critique, and yes, even celebrate my own work. Second, I need to stay up to date with the scholarly fields to which my work relates, so I can show where and how it fits in and truly advances the sum total of human knowledge. Third, I need to prepare to respond to some likely broad questions that my examiners might ask me. I need to prepare enough so that detail but not waffle becomes natural, but I should not over-rehearse, otherwise my responses might become robotic. And last, I need to scrub up on my examiner's work. Doing so will give me a clearer idea of their specific research interests, and so I'll be better able to anticipate the sort of things that they will focus on when reading my thesis, because they're naturally going to focus on the things that interest them the most. So I then translated those themes into tasks, arranged those tasks into a revision calendar, and then stuck that up somewhere in my flat that I look at an awful lot, which just so happens to be the front of a kitchen cupboard. Now, I just need to make sure that I stick to that revision calendar. Wish me luck! I have 17 days until my PhD Viva, and today I chose kindness. That revision prep session you just saw finished well past midnight last night, and so I've been pretty exhausted all day. As such, after work, I stuck to my revision calendar and did a couple of lighter tasks. First, I stuck a bunch of post-it notes into my thesis in order to mark out the different chapters and the subsections within those. I mean, look at that. It is now very much a thing of beauty. Now this actually took me a surprisingly long time, but that's probably just because I can get quite fussy about things being neat from time to time. Now I did this because the podcast that I listened to yesterday suggested that making your thesis easily navigatable during the Viva is a good idea. And so I figured that the same principle might also apply for when I was rereading and revising and making notes on the thesis as well. Second, I produced this absolute beauty, a chapter crib sheet. Following a blog that I read, I'll be making notes on one of these per chapter. Although the author of the blog did a science PhD, her advice of having in one place a summary of different parts and characteristics of a chapter sounded pretty helpful to me. Having looked at some typical Viva questions, I broke the sheet into the following topics: chapter title and summary, key texts that influenced it, the chapter's strengths or cool things that it contained, the chapter's weaknesses and how I suggest I might act on them, any errors that I find, and what I could do with the chapter next, i.e. how could I maybe get a publication out from the chapter, how could I maybe deliver part of the chapter at a conference. So if that is the contents of the chapter crib sheet, I guess the important question is now, how useful is that actually going to be when it comes to rereading and revising my thesis? I guess I'll find out tomorrow when I start doing that for the very first chapter of the thesis, the introduction. I have 16 days until my PhD Viva, and today I'm learning some lessons around pace and workload. It is, for me, like the third day on the trot of doing quite a lot of Viva prep quite late into the evenings, and I am starting to get quite tired, to be honest. And maybe I need to consider sort of how and when I'm getting the Viva prep done in sort of the next couple of weeks, just to make sure I'm not completely overdoing it and burning out, or just sort of getting too tired, because ultimately I don't want to get too tired in advance of the Viva itself and then, you know, just be sort of a sleepy mess on the day. However, it's not all bad news today. As per my revision timetable, I looked over, reviewed and made notes on my thesis intro this evening. And it's not bad actually. I think it's like key strength is that I deal with quite a lot of different sort of theoretical areas or ideas, topics, sort of research interests, fields, whatever you want to call it, in my thesis. And I think the intro that I've written does quite a good job at sort of setting the scene for all of those and kind of explaining how they intersect and how they work together. I think in particular, although I don't spend a huge deal of the intro going over this section in particular, I think I quite persuasively and quite like authoritatively, I guess, go over what I think about dystopian literature, or the criticism around dystopian literature, what sort of scholars are saying about it, and sort of covering a lot of what they're saying in sort of quite a quick, speedy fashion. Yeah, so the intro actually I think is good so far, although it sort of fell into the cliche, which like everyone says this, you know, you see online and stuff like, oh, you know, the pain of like preparing for your Viva, and you noticed a typo on page 1 of your thesis. And yes, I noticed a typo on page 1 of my thesis being a missing comma, and I don't know, there's something ironic in that. You know, I've been an English teacher, and you know, I spend, you know, or I have spent so much time on YouTube sort of trying to help young people with their study of English, and right there, the first page of my thesis, I miss out a comma. It's not that deep of a comma though. I like using the Oxford comma, if you know what that is, and I just missed that out. But that means I've been inconsistent throughout my thesis, because I'm normally quite a stickler for the Oxford comma. So yeah, you know, kind of funny. Like I've seen a few typos and like a few moments where I've maybe overwritten slightly, or a few like overlong sentences or paragraphs, and maybe even like one place where I could have maybe put in a reference and I didn't. And I think if maybe this was me a few months ago, like having just submitted, I'd have freaked out because like, oh my god, like yeah, this is missing, that is missing, rah, 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 or this is wrong, this is wrong. And now I'm just kind of like, it's okay. Like, you know, if the examiners pick up on these things and they give me minor corrections, you know, it won't take me too long to deal with those things. So yeah, I'm actually in a weirdly good place about that. So hopefully that continues, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next step of my Viva preparation journey. So peace out. I'm going to bed. I have 15 days until my PhD Viva, and today I am going on an adventure. You see, I've got the day off of work, and so I'm heading outside of Birmingham to meet up with my lead PhD supervisor, Dr. Nathan Waddell, to have basically a Viva pep talk. We're going to chat about the PhD, the thesis, the Viva, and everything that those might entail. And it'll be a chance for me to ask any questions or express any concerns that I might have about what's left of the process. And hopefully for Nathan to give me some advice or solutions, or just to generally calm my anxieties and worries. So let's see how that goes. Well then, I am not long back from that trip, and my goodness, what a sort of reassuring and worthwhile and enjoyable trip to have made. We chatted about, you know, life and sort of work, and of course the PhD, the thesis, the Viva, and lots of my sort of fears and anxieties, I think, have been, at least for now, relieved. I feel like I have a stronger idea of who's going to be examining me. Like, I know who's examining me already, but sort of what they're like as people or as examiners, what sort of questions they might be asking, or what energies they might bring to the room. I've got a better understanding now of how to answer the questions that might come my way. Not necessarily like specific answers, but sort of the strategies to use in answering those questions. Yeah, it was just a very, very sort of helpful chat to have had, and like I said, well worth the trip. I have probably mentioned this somewhere in this video already, and if not, definitely on a video I've made on this channel somewhere, but I am so grateful to have had Nathan as my lead supervisor throughout this process. He taught me years ago when I was doing my undergraduate, and he's been a sort of constant source of support ever since, to be honest. And I feel very lucky to have been able to have worked with or like with him, or like under his sort of mentorship, his supervision the last few years, and especially recently he's offered me quite a lot of, I guess, like really profound sort of advice and sort of career support and just general presence that's been quite reassuring. So Nath, if you are watching this, thank you so much, you know, for everything over, well, the best part of a decade now, but certainly the last sort of 4 or 5 years. I do really appreciate it. We did talk about my revision timetable, and Nathan thought it looked pretty good, the timetable that you've seen, you know, sort of early in this video, that is. But he did sort of say, you know, one piece of feedback might be to factor in a bit more rest, which is maybe something I needed to hear, because rest and breaks are not things that I'm very good at taking at the best of times. Anyway, really productive day. I've got stuff to be getting on with this evening now that isn't like Viva prep. But yeah, I feel reinvigorated and reassured and ready to continue with this preparation. I have 13 days until my PhD Viva. Hang on, day 13? What happened to day 14? Well, I have 14 days until my PhD Viva, and tonight I'm taking a break. I've got a bit of time off work coming up over the next week or so, and so I think I can afford an evening off. So, I have 13 days until my PhD Viva, and today I'm feeling slightly behind schedule. Maybe that is partially because I followed Nathan's advice and decided to have a bit of a break last night, and so as such I'm, you know, behind that original schedule. At this point, I sort of have spent today going over another chapter, chapter 1 of the thesis. I've done the intro, chapter 1 now, and so yeah, but I was planning on being sort of done with chapter 2 and 3 by this point, and so a part of me is a bit worried, but then also I'm kind of not super worried, because, you know, plans are there to be flexible. Moreover, although I've only done the intro in chapter 1 and still have left chapter 2, 3, 4, 5 and the conclusion, chapter 1 and the introduction between them are like 112 pages long, and like the main part of the thesis is 260 odd. So I'm about a third of the way through, which is good, because it means that the next chapters are shorter. Like chapter 1 is a bit of a beast, to be honest, and maybe that's something I need to sort of think about in reference to the Viva, sort of explaining how and why I decided to have a much larger sort of first chapter after the introduction. That's something for me to think about over the next sort of couple of weeks. So yes, slightly behind schedule, but not panicking right now. I have 12 days until my Viva. I am off on another adventure today. Going to meet up with some friends and go for a nice walk with them out and about, get some fresh air, and then hopefully later this afternoon I'll be able to maybe go against the revision timetable, and rather than take all of today off, maybe I will work on another chapter or two tonight. I didn't get any more edits done last night because I was working on a video that you've probably seen by now. So yeah, so maybe I ought to do some work. I have 11 days until my PhD Viva, and today has been a bit of a mixed day. Let's start with some positives. So first of all, I have regained a sense of momentum. I have gone through and fully reviewed 2 chapters today. So I've done chapters 2 and 3 of the thesis, meaning I've got chapters 4 and 5 and the very short conclusion left after that. So regaining some momentum, really sort of big win. I think I've sort of fell off it a little bit the last couple of days, so yeah, happy with that. Another big win, I guess, was chapter number 2, so the first chapter I looked at today. I was actually quite pleased with. I remember when I was writing that chapter, and it was quite a while ago when I wrote that one now, I did really struggle with it. And I remember really battling with it and sort of really pushing hard to get the analysis done, to sort of convey the ideas and etc., to get like all the sort of right reading done and articulating myself, you know, sort of, I guess, eloquently. I remember that being a real challenge for that chapter. I remember in particular, shortly after submitting it, I saw a friend for lunch, and he said like basically, Liam, you like crap, like you've sort of, you know, like you're really ill, or like you've, you know, been through the wars, like, are you okay? And I was just like, yeah, just working on a really tricky chapter. So I guess what I'm saying is that chapter was a real struggle to get written, and I don't really remember what it was like to edit it sort of more recently over sort of the December-January period, but yeah, the chapter read okay, and I'm quite pleased with that. I guess that brings me to sort of the things that maybe weren't so successful today or weren't so great about today. One of those is sort of explaining sort of maybe my tone of voice right now, and as a consequence of me finding momentum. I'm tired. It's been a long day. The first chapter that I reviewed today, I sort of did in the early afternoon, and then I took a break and went for a nice walk and whatever, and then after that I sort of sat down to review a second chapter, so chapter number 3, you know, late into the evening. You know, I say I have 11 days until my Viva, but you know, it's almost midnight, and so really it's more like 10 at this point. So yeah, so a bit tired, and although I've gained momentum, that's maybe come at the cost of working quite hard today, and being quite tired as a result. And that, as well as maybe sort of explaining the second sort of like not so great thing about today, which is, although chapter 2, so the first chapter I worked on today, I was quite happy with, chapter 3 I am less keen on. I think it is a bit weaker overall, and maybe me being a bit tired and maybe yeah, just being a bit worn out is making me a bit more critical of myself and my writing, and is maybe meaning I'm a bit less resilient right now. I often notice that, you know, the more tired I am, the more critical I get, and so, you know, maybe I should have not pushed so hard today to get that second chapter, chapter 3, sort of examined today. Yeah, I'm not so convinced by the chapter. I think it's a shorter chapter, and maybe it could have done with another 1,000 or 2,000 words, just to maybe push on with some of the analysis, or to put in a bit more like secondary reading to ground what I'm saying. I'm not fully sure at this point, but I think I can see that it's not quite as fleshed out as maybe some of the other writing that I've done. But then also I didn't have, you know, any other words to play around with in the overall word count, because 80,000 was my max, and I was, what, like 38 short from that or something. So yeah, something to maybe think about and discuss ahead of the Viva, or think about ahead of the Viva and then discuss within it. So yeah, mixed bag today. I am quite tired, and I'm, although still maybe like slightly behind compared to where I wanted to be by now, I feel like I am catching up, and I have maybe made some good strides today. I've definitely, you know, broken the back of the thesis, as it were. You know, I've done what, the introduction and the first 3 main chapters, so I'm more than halfway there, with only 2 main chapters and a very short conclusion left to go. So although I am tired now, and I'm sort of moaning about maybe having pushed a bit too hard today, if I can get the 2 remaining main chapters done tomorrow, that'd be really good. And given that the conclusion is so short, if I can push through and do all 3 of those things, that would be amazing, and yeah, would be a real accomplishment. It would mean that maybe I can factor in a bit more rest elsewhere, sort of over the next week and a half. So yeah, I'm going to go to bed, because I am knackered, as I'm sure you can tell, and I've said about 1 billion times. And yeah, here is to a better rested and more resilient Liam tomorrow. I have 10 days until my PhD Viva, and today I'll keep the summary brief. I managed to read through chapters 4 and 5 of my thesis today and make notes on them, and I'm quite pleased overall with what I've read, I guess. These chapters seem a bit stronger, perhaps. The last chapter in particular, I think might be the one I'm proudest of in the thesis, and the one that I think is strongest. There seems to be sort of fewer silly mistakes in them, and even just sort of fewer immediately obvious weaknesses. That's not to say that they are flawless chapters by any means, but ones I'm just generally feeling happier with overall. So yes, I've almost finished now reviewing the thesis from like a chapter by chapter perspective. All I have left to do now is the coda, the conclusion, which is intentionally quite short. I think it was like 6 pages or something, so I probably could have pushed on and gave it a go tonight, but I decided to call it a day. I have caught up on my revision timetable where I said I was going to be at this point, which is a nice feeling for sure. So I'm going to go to sleep and see what tomorrow has in store for me, because I am not just finishing up looking at my thesis. I've got a hopefully quite a nice chat in the evening to look forward to as well, which I'll tell you all about tomorrow. Peace, peace. I have 9 days until my PhD Viva, and today I finished rereading and reviewing my thesis. You see, as part of my normal day-to-day job, I often run a weekly co-working session for PhD students, and although I'm not actually at work today, I did manage to hold one of those co-working sessions anyway, just because I tend to find them to be quite productive for me. So I held one of those sessions, and in that session, not only did I manage to reread and review my coda, my thesis conclusion, but I was also able to draft and put together a thesis overview document, which I then completed as well. Now, for those of you that are maybe have eagle eyes and are a bit more attentive, you might notice that therefore means that I am actually now ahead of schedule. I have seen off not only the jobs that I was meant to do today, but actually the 2 jobs that I was meant to do tomorrow and the day after that as well, which is quite a good feeling. Anyway, after I reviewed the rest of my thesis and wrote that thesis overview document, I then went to the pub, and when I was at the pub I met up with a good friend who finished his PhD a few months ago and went through this process himself not too long ago. As such, he's someone who has got that like recent lived experience of preparing for and going through the Viva, and he is a friend who's actually read my entire thesis. He offered to be a reader for me a few weeks ago, and I gladly took him up on the offer, and as such he sort of gave me a little practice Viva sort of, or asked me the sorts of questions that are likely to come up, and we just generally chatted through the thesis and my answers to those questions, and any other like thoughts or questions that I had around the process, which was really nice and really helpful. So I'm in a weirdly good place today. It feels nice knowing that I'm maybe slightly ahead of where I'd planned to be, especially given that I've sort of had times where I've been slightly behind schedule and times where I've been on schedule, and now it's nice to be ahead of schedule. And I'm sure there'll come a point in the next day or two where I'll be maybe behind again. I guess aside from reflecting on my thesis itself, which I'm more pleased with than not, I guess, something that's really stood out to me today is the importance of community. These co-working sessions that I hold with PhD students are like a part of my job that I've really loved, and something that I made use of before I started my current job and was just a PhD student. And those sessions have generated a really supportive PhD student community that I myself support and sort of help bring together, but I'm also part of. You know, I am both a university staff member but also a PhD student myself. And then meeting my friend this afternoon for that sort of pint and yeah, sort of discussion of my thesis, a sort of Viva but sort of not, again was just testament to community, to the people that you meet whilst doing a PhD who are able to offer you support, whether that's just through working alongside you to help you stay motivated, or if they're, you know, able to offer you, you know, quite profound support in, you know, reading over and you know, asking you big questions about your thesis to prepare you for a Viva. So yeah, I feel very fortunate today. I recognise that I have met a lot of really great people whilst doing this PhD, and I think, you know, these are brilliant people who have appeared throughout my PhD journey, and so it only feels right, I guess, this close to the very end of it, to acknowledge and sort of thank those people, and to, you know, go through some of the very final stages of the PhD process with them around or alongside me. So yeah, have a lot of warm fuzzy feelings tonight. Doing a PhD can be really tough, it can be, but the people you meet along the way really do help with that, and do really make the dark times a little bit brighter, and I'm just very, very appreciative of that. I have 8 days until my PhD Viva, and today I had a bit of a break. That was partially circumstantial. A few things today kind of didn't quite go to plan and were a bit out of my control, and therefore meant that I wasn't able to really allocate time to working today. And then there's also some stuff happening over the next couple of days that I needed to kind of get ready for, which likewise got in the way of any sort of profound Viva prep. But also having a bit of a break from Viva preparation was partially intentional as well. I've worked quite hard over the last few days. Yes, I've had maybe you know, a few breaks or a few moments of rest here or there, but even sort of some of the more restful moments, you know, like my lovely walk around Sutton Park at the weekend was lovely, but you know, it was like a 4-hour walk, so you know, maybe restful for the brain but physically exhausting. And so I was sort of thinking earlier, like, it's been a long sort of Easter weekend for me. I've been off since Friday, it's now Wednesday, just with how sort of things work with my job and sort of where the holidays fall in there. And yet I hadn't really taken a full proper day to me. And to be fair, I still haven't really done that today, but I just felt, knowing that today is sort of my last sort of day's holiday for this sort of period, I might as well try to do a little bit less. So yeah, I've maybe done like the tiniest bits of prep, by which I mean really, like I've done some stuff that has prepared me for the next few days, because again, like, things are gonna be different. You'll see, things are a bit different over the next few days. So I've maybe done like some tiny little bits just to set up sort of successful preparation there, but yeah, on the whole, not really done all that much, but maybe that's okay. You know, worst case scenario, I've read my thesis, I know it fairly well. I had that sort of kind of mock Viva, kind of informed chat with a friend yesterday, and at the moment I'm feeling relatively okay, so I'm just going to try to own that. Anyway, I'm doing this update right at the end of the day again, because yeah, that's sort of when I've got time to do it. I need to now go to bed because I'm back to work tomorrow. So I'll see you on the other side. maybe in some slightly different circumstances and some slightly different settings. So yeah, whatever that might mean, I'll see you on the other side. I have 7 days until my PhD Viva, and once again I am on the move. Yeah, I was always going to be travelling back to, well, quite dark and dreary Devon this weekend for a family thing, but due to things out of my control, I've had to come down tonight, Thursday evening rather than Friday afternoon, which is fine. We move, we adapt. All has not been lost though. Whilst I have been on the train, I've managed to work on my phone because the train's around and so a laptop isn't really going to happen, but I've been able to work on my phone on some sort of generic questions that I found whilst doing that sort of research going back now, you know, sort of a week and a half ago or whenever it was, as well as some questions that friends had sent my way, or some specific questions that I'd been asked by either my supervisor in our catch up the other week or by my mate the other night as well. So yeah, I've been just sort of working through those, highlighting them green, yellow or red as per how like easy or confident I feel those questions. So green, easy peasy; yellow, a bit more challenging; red, not very confident. And as you might see on screen now as well, like the bullet points sort of match that too. So if it's an easy question, 1 bullet point; middle question, 2 bullet points; hard question, 3 bullet points. I'm not aiming to sort of practice or rehearse those off by heart too much, but certainly I'll be using those to get some thoughts on paper or on screen, you know, and then sort of maybe have a look over those in sort of the nights before the Viva itself, just to get myself in the right headspace again, to think about the questions that I might be receiving and to think about how I might be answering them. So yes, 7 days to go. You know, a week today and the Viva will be done, which is weird. And yeah, let's see how the rest of the evening goes. Let's hope I get home in one piece. I have 6 days until my PhD Viva, and once again today I have been on the move. I am back in Devon to see my family for a family birthday, and we are in a very gorgeous farmhouse at the moment, in some very sort of remote settings, and it's really lovely here, to be fair. Today has not been completely lost though. After work today I managed to squeeze in about an hour or so with tackling some of those Viva questions to think about, reflect on and prepare for. I'd sort of hoped that I'd maybe been done with those questions by now. It's taken me a little bit longer than I thought it would. But I think that's because I've just had a sort of slightly disrupted couple of days. It's been a lot of travel, a lot of sort of late days, a lot of just squeezing a lot in, basically. But at this point I'm not too worried. Most of the questions I'm sort of doing all right with. I seem to have a response to them, for most of them at least. I don't know if they're good responses or the responses, but it seems like nothing is stumping me so far. So yes, just thinking about those questions, thinking about my project, thinking about sort of the limits and the extent of my project, its strengths, its weaknesses, its contributions, its originality, its whatever. So yeah, so that's it really. 6 days to go. Hoping that the next 2 days, whilst we're still here properly, I'll be able to carve out some time to finish up reflecting on those questions and reading up some final bits and bobs too. So yes, that's it from me. Oh yeah, also I just won the family quiz. Definitely not competitive in the slightest, but yeah, come on, a little success story for Liam. Yeah. I have 5 days until my PhD Viva, and today, alongside lots of quite nice wholesome time with my family, I have finished looking over those questions that I'm sort of anticipating, or those sort of generic questions that in preparing for those I should be able to cover most generic questions that might come my way during the Viva. And I've also done a bit of reading. I didn't manage to get any sort of footage of that, but I have started reading some of my examiner's work, just to have a look at sort of their current and or relevant ideas and work that is related to my thesis, but also in doing that I'm trying to sort of get my head around what they think about, in my case, like dystopian fiction, and try to sort of see maybe like what assumptions and what like big claims they're making, what interests they have in relation to the genre, to try to sort of maybe anticipate some of the things that they might say, or sort of the assumptions that they might bring to the table. So yeah, still got a few more to go. I've only really scrubbed up on one examiner so far, and I've got 3, so yeah, maybe a third of the way there, although I could always do a bit more for the first one too. But yes, 5 days, it's really close now, to be honest, and I'm quite glad for the distractions that I've got around me this weekend. Yeah, but just hoping that the final few days go smoothly. I have 4 days until my PhD Viva, and today I've continued to scrub up on my examiners and read their work and try to understand a little bit better, or anticipate, I guess, a little bit better the questions they may ask me during the Viva. So I continued reading the book and work from that first examiner I was mentioning yesterday, and his book is really concerned with the dystopia, or the dystopian imaginary, I guess, and politics, and how we understand or try to use dystopian fiction to understand modern and contemporary politics, whilst at the same time modern and contemporary politics helps us to understand, or helps to inform, I guess, the dystopian imaginings that are being produced, or the dystopian imaginary of the time, I guess. Whereas also, as much as they help us to understand the now, these dystopias are very much reflecting on and sort of shedding light on their contemporary moments, whilst also being shaped by their contemporary moments. So like, they shed light on them, but they are likewise produced by them. So sort of fiction helps us to understand reality, and reality helps us to understand fiction. I did notice though, in sort of doing some more Googling essentially of the examiner in question, that he's had an article come out in the last sort of few months, and so I sort of gave it a quick look over, and got sort of lost down a bit of a Wikipedia rabbit hole, chasing up some texts he was talking about, and in doing so didn't really focus on his sort of meta-critical argument. So I need to sort of get back into that and maybe have a look at what his current thoughts are about. I then also started to look at what my other examiners, and annoyingly my university doesn't have much in the way of his work available, at least not sort of through digital means, which is frustrating because like, my Viva's soon and I want to understand him, but also he works for the uni, so he's my internal examiner, and so you kind of think the uni would have his books. But to work around that, I was able to dig through some old emails of mine, because he was my reader for my mid-year review, this process we have at Birmingham in our first years of our PhD. And in that, we submit a piece of work that is related to our thesis, is trying to sort of indicate where we're trying to go with it. And you have some sort of academics, not part of your supervisory team, have a look at it and determine whether it shows doctoral potential or not. And my internal examiner was one of my readers for that, so I was able to go back and read through his examiner's report, so essentially his feedback on my writing. And from there I could kind of see that he was really interested in theory, like critical theory, literary theory. He was certainly mentioning a lot of big names, that some of whom I cite in the thesis, but different texts to what he was suggesting, and some I don't talk about at all, sort of intentionally. So he's quite hot on that. He was asking a question around, I guess, just like refining my own theory, my own theoretical stance, my conception of endotext and endotextuality, and hopefully I have done quite a lot more work on that since halfway through my first year.
So I'll be able to hopefully speak about that a bit more. And he did ask a really good question in there about whether endotexts are always as serious as these. Like, I was making some quite big claims in my first year about what they are and what they do. And although I still stand by a significant portion of those claims, maybe not all of them, or maybe the sort of intensity of those should be reduced slightly. And that's fine, you know, I think I've done that, and I think I can argue that although I still think they are quite serious on the whole, and the ones that I'm talking about are quite serious on the whole, even the ones that are maybe a bit less serious still have meaning and value that has so far been quite overlooked, I think, within scholarship. So yeah, that's the second person I looked at, and sort of my internal examiner, and how I'm trying to get my head around his possible questions, his, you know, the questions I'm anticipating from him. And that first examiner, yeah, he's certainly looking a lot at dystopias as political vehicles, so I'm expecting maybe questions around dystopia, politics, modern politics. I talk about post-truth an awful lot in my thesis, which is a political issue, I'd say, and so I'm expecting questions around that. But he also pays quite a lot of attention to form, it's like literary form, and I think endotexts are, in essence, a formal device. I argue as such in the thesis, and so I'm expecting he will probably ask questions around form as well, and maybe, you know, what do endotexts offer formally? Like, formally, what do they achieve, I guess, that would differ from other formal, I don't know, manoeuvres, techniques, whatever. So yes, but I'll still dig back and read up on his more recent article. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I've got him to maybe finish scrubbing up on, and my third and final examiner. But yeah, it's 4 days to go. I am starting to feel it a little bit. But what can I do about it? I've just got to keep on keeping on and try not to overthink it too much.
I have 3 days until my PhD Viva, and today I am tired. I've had a really lovely long weekend, but the travel that I've had to do today to get back to Birmingham has absolutely wiped me, I will not lie. I managed to do a bit of reading on the train this afternoon, this morning, whenever it was, of that first examiner and that article he recently published, which was good to read and sort of good to see where his more recent thoughts are versus his book that's a little bit older. And then, yeah, to be honest, I started to read the third examiner's book. Again, one that I read for like the thesis itself at the time, but just one that I wanted to dig back into, and I just didn't have it in me today. Just didn't have the energy, didn't have the capacity, the spoons, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I think I need to rest. To be very honest, I think I need to go to bed, basically, and try to refresh and recharge, and hopefully have a good productive day tomorrow. See you on the other side. I have 2 days until my PhD Viva, or perhaps a bit more accurately, about 36 hours to go. And today I have maybe finished reviewing all of my examiner's work. This evening I've managed to throw in a bit of time to be able to read up on my final examiner and some of the things that she's published and written, and her sort of research interests, to try to figure out what sort of questions she might be asking me in the Viva. She's got a much more sort of varied, I'd say, sort of group of interests, which throws up its own set of complexities perhaps, or at least a sort of bigger variety of interests that might be relevant to my thesis. She works a lot on dystopian fiction and a lot on sort of narrative form, or has done, you know, previously. Maybe with more of an emphasis on post-apocalypse, which I don't really cover so much in my work. But yeah, I can sort of see how she might ask me some questions around maybe like the limitations and boundaries of genre, because that seems to cut quite a bit in her work. She seems to do like this really interesting thing in her own writing about using genre and texts and I guess like small details to talk about quite big things, like quite big meta concepts, you know, like time, history, memory, and like I guess like the cultural or critical theories that kind of inform how we understand those things, which I'm aware sounds quite deep and quite complex, and maybe it is, I'm not so sure, but given that I look at quite a small specific thing, so my endotexts, and I look at how those relate to a really big idea, i.e. truth, I think I could see how some questions around that might come up in her questions, or in her sort of reading and response to my thesis. I also noticed that she co-wrote like this like, I don't know, opinion article maybe a few years ago, pushing back against like the canon, or what the canon should be, or ideas around canonicity generally. So i.e. like the texts that are like revered as like the big name texts that, you know, people read because they must read them, so, you know, like Shakespeare, Dickens, Jane Austen, whatever. And so because of that, I might anticipate a question from her around sort of my selection of texts. I say in my thesis, like I look at like canonical texts, I look at classical but forgotten or overlooked texts, and I look at contemporary texts, and I wonder if she might like that, the fact that I'm not just looking at canonical texts, so it's like, again, those big name ones, or maybe if she might ask me to sort of deconstruct what I mean by canon, and question to what extent my thesis does deconstruct that, because although I still draw on, you know, that sort of range of texts, yeah, I do still sort of fall back on canonical texts, or at least, like, you know, make sure I'm, you know, there's a canonical text in each chapter, right? So to what extent am I really breaking free from the canon, which is probably a valid question to have, and one that I'll certainly think about. Anyway, enough rambling from me. Once again, I'm pretty tired, but yes, 2 days to go, or 36 hours to go. I mean, the pressure's been on for the last few days. I think I've probably made that kind of clear by now, but yeah, it's weird. A friend who's already finished her PhD a while back now, she messaged me today to wish me luck, which was really lovely, and I sort of said, well, I'm just feeling a bit like about it at this point, you know, like shrug emoji, like, I don't know, it'll be, you know what I mean? Like I think I am stressed to an extent, or at least anxious and worried, you know, to an extent, because I've not done this before, and, you know, it's been 4.5 years of quite hard work leading up to what feels like quite a momentous occasion. But maybe my sort of shrug emoji response, maybe that's indicating, like, kind of might have done enough in terms of like preparation. You know, I've read my thesis at this point, I've sort of responded and sort of, you know, made answers to anticipated generic questions. I've read up on my examiners and their work, and sort of tried to anticipate questions that they might have more specifically. You know, I don't know if there's a great deal more that I could do at this point, so I don't know, maybe that's it, or at least for like brand new prep. We'll see how I'm feeling tomorrow and go from there, I guess. I have one day until my PhD Viva, or rather about 14 hours until it begins, and yeah, the nerves are really kicking in. I know I've sort of said it over like maybe the weekend that I was starting to feel it a little bit, but goodness gracious, yeah, as of about 4-5 o'clock today, yeah, the sense of, I don't know, dread, excitement, anxiousness, just chaotic energy has been, yeah, pretty overwhelming. And that's probably, you know, quite normal. You know, it's quite a big day, as I've probably said already in this video. You know, I've been essentially working 4.5 years to get to this point, and so I think it's probably quite normal for me to feel like the pressure is on. But I do need to keep on reminding myself, and I have been vocalizing this, that like tomorrow isn't actually going to be the deal breaker. Like, you know, my examiners have had my thesis for a couple of months and they've read it and been assessing that, and you know, that is really where like the magic's happened, where the work has happened. And tomorrow is really just about, you know, me showing that I know my stuff. And tomorrow shouldn't really be like, not a big deal, because of course it's a huge deal. You know, it feels like a huge deal, it feels so important, but I think I need to remind myself, like, the hard work's done. You know, it's, you know, it was done over 4.5 years, and you know, the best part of 80,000 words, or you know, 100,000+ words in the whole document, and so many like other thousands of words written that didn't even make it into the final thing. And so yeah, I am nervous, I am anxious, I am apprehensive, I doubt I'm going to sleep very well tonight. But I also need to sort of rationalise and tell myself, like, Liam, you know, it's done. There's nothing that I can do right now, you know, other than, I guess, rest and make sure that I'm at least coherent during, you know, the Viva itself. In terms of what I've actually done today, you know, I've tried to sort of keep myself busy in order to sort of distract myself, and tried to sort of do what little I can just to, you know, I guess help to continue prepare myself for tomorrow. So I've done no new work, but those like chapter sort of crib sheets, those documents that I spent some time making the best part of, you know, 2.5 weeks ago now. I just spent a bit of time looking over those again, looking over sort of the summaries of my own work that I've written, the strengths and weaknesses that I've highlighted, the different parts of my chapters that I think might be good candidates for publication, or sort of taking forwards after this process is complete. I had a look over my sort of whole thesis overview document as well. I spent a bit of time reading back over the sort of questions that I'd found online and the answers that I'd prepared for them, or like the ideas that I'd put that could be good responses to them, might be a better way of phrasing that, because I'm not going to remember them, I'm not going to memorize them, but just having gone through the process of like trying to articulate answers to generic and quite typical Viva questions, I'm hoping will set me up well for answering generic Viva questions that might come up tomorrow. And I spent a bit of time looking over the notes I made about my examiners and the sort of emphases that come across in their work, and sort of therefore what sort of questions they might want to ask. Again, I've not prepared like proper, you know, answers for me to repeat word for word to them, because, you know, these are questions that might not even come up. But again, just sort of jotting down like the vibe, the feel for the sort of question they might be asking me, and thinking about how I could respond to that. I'm hoping that might help. But if I'm being really honest, although I've tried to do a lot of that prep, and although I've tried to distract myself, I've been quite distracted. And so, you know, I've been glancing over these documents, I've been sort of scrolling through the document on my phone, I've been sort of flicking through the notes I've made about my examiners, but I haven't really taken a great deal of it in, I don't think. And part of that, again, I think just, yeah, a bit nervous, a bit scatty. But part of it too, I think, is I think I've done all the prep I can do at this point. Yeah, I'm going to try and get an early night. I thankfully don't have work tomorrow. I've got a couple of days holiday, so one for tomorrow and one for the day afterwards. And yeah, I'm going to sort of try and go through a normal morning routine. Maybe I'll look over some more notes and whatnot. And yeah, I'm not quite sure yet exactly how much I'm going to vlog tomorrow. I can't take any recording device into the Viva itself, so that won't be included in this vlog. But you know, some preamble and some sort of post-match reflections might be possible. We'll see. I'm making no promises. But of course, you're watching this video, which is already going to be, I know, quite a long video. And thank you so much for watching. I hope this has been, I don't know, useful or interesting somehow. I don't know. I've lost a train of thought there. I'm clearly tired and again a bit nervous, a bit scatty. So I have about 14 hours to go. The Viva, I can't escape it at this point, and I've run out of time in which to get any more profound additional preparation done, but also I think I've kind of got to the point where I don't know if that's going to be possible anymore either. So let's get a good night's sleep, let's have a good morning tomorrow, let's go for my normal routine. Maybe you'll come with me, maybe you won't, I don't know. It is the day of my PhD Viva. More accurately, I've got about 3.5 hours until it kicks off. I recognise that I was quite deep in the, I don't know, pit of anxiety last night, and you know, I still feel it now. I still have a lot of nervous energy about me. Yeah, like I said last night, yeah, this is a day I've been building up to now for 4.5 years, so it's bound to feel quite big. I didn't sleep too brilliantly, I won't lie. It was quite a restless night, quite a lot of unpleasant dreams about the Viva, but that's fine. I am trying to treat this like a relatively normal morning, and so I'm walking onto the university campus as I normally would do for my job, and I'm going to go to the gym. I do that every morning pretty much before work anyway, but so I wanted to keep up with that, to sort of settle into a routine, or to like stay in a settled routine. But also I figure, you know, doing an hour's cardio or thereabouts whilst, you know, listening to something fun or watching something fun will act as a good distractor. It'll maybe help me to expend some of this nervous energy that I'm feeling, and also I'd hope like the endorphins from the workout, from the runner's high, whatever you want to call it, I hope those might sort of put me in a good place for the rest of the day, the rest of the morning and the early part of the afternoon too. So yeah, catch you in a moment. I have about 1 hour and 3/4 until my Viva. I've just sort of smashed it at the gym, to be honest. I think the nervous energy definitely helped with powering through quite an intense cardio session. I'm now heading to my office to grab a shower and to quickly say hello to whichever of my colleagues may be in today. Again, like I said earlier, I'm sort of using this familiar routine to maybe help me, you know, settle into the day, settle into the unfamiliar. Yeah, with the adrenaline pumping through and the endorphins pumping through, I'm actually feeling kind of okay. Yes, still nervous, but maybe a bit more confident or a bit less full of dread than I was earlier. But yeah, quickly popping into the office, grabbing a shower, saying hello to my colleagues, before I then head off to do the next stage of my sort of pre-Viva itinerary. And here we are, back again. I have about an hour until my PhD Viva, and I'm now walking across campus to go meet up with Nathan, my lead supervisor, as you know by now, to have a, I don't know, pep talk, catch up, chat, whatever. I don't really know what exactly we might discuss, whether we're going to be talking about the thesis, about the Viva, about any sort of remaining questions I might have, or if we're going to do the exact opposite and talk about literally anything other than the PhD, the thesis, the Viva. Regardless, I think spending the final hour before it with Nathan is going to be, it's right, it ties up things neatly.
yeah, he's been such a massive support to me, not just over the last 4.5 years, but like he first started teaching me about a decade ago now during my undergrad, and he's been such a huge support on my, not just my academic journey I guess, but like just my personal journey, you know, like he taught me during my undergrad, you know, best part of a decade ago, and like he's just been supporting me throughout a lot of stuff, either directly or indirectly in that time. And yeah, I feel very lucky to be able to work with him, or to have been like mentored and supported by him for so long. And so yeah, it's right that I'm spending the next hour with him. Honestly, I can't sort of stress this enough, that having not just a good supervisor, but a truly excellent supervisor is such a blessing during a PhD, especially, well, throughout, but especially in these latter, quite stressful, scary, intense, intimidating, momentous stages. I have 5 minutes until my PhD Viva.
And that was the last piece of footage I recorded before my Viva, and indeed was the last piece of footage that I recorded on the day of the Viva, full stop. But what actually happened? How did it go? Well, it has been 3 days since my PhD Viva. Shortly after that last piece of footage that you saw of me in Nathan's office, my Viva chairperson came to collect me. Now, this person is not an examiner, but they are an academic who is there to sit in on the Viva and to basically act as like the referee. They're there to make sure, you know, all the rules are followed, and that like no one's out of order, that, you know, breaks are held as and when needed, and so on. So my chairperson came to collect me. She led me up one flight of stairs and into the room in which my Viva took place. And there I was introduced to my examiners, Dr. Adam Stock, Dr. Diletta de Cristoforo, and Dr. Matt Haler. Now, Adam and Matt I'd already met in sort of different circumstances and in brief, whereas Diletta I'd never met before, but have known of her for a while through social media and through her scholarship, basically. So it was nice to meet all three of them in that context, and really lovely to be examined by them. We opened with a big generic question. Why did you pick this topic? Tell us the story of how you got here. And in answering that question, I told them a story that I'd been thinking about for a while, about how I love dystopian fiction, about how looking at intertextuality in my master's introduced me to the works of Gerard Genette, who's a critic who I've mentioned a few times in the thesis. I talk about how as a teacher I was reading dystopian fiction one summer and found a pattern that I didn't think was being adequately addressed in scholarship. After that we moved on to some more thesis specific questions, and overall I'd say the Viva was a challenging but very supportive and engaging and eventually quite enjoyable chat. Like, I was quite nervous to begin with, and I remember like sitting down at this sort of, you know, big square table and almost feeling like I was going to cry straight away, just I guess with the sheer amount of emotions running through me and the anxiety and the, you know, the sense of occasion. But that sort of settled relatively quickly. One of my examiners said it was the slowest he'd ever read a thesis, because he wanted to see if the claims that I'd made and the arguments I was constructing stood up. And he said that it did, and that he was really, really persuaded by what I'd written. And all three of them were really supportive and lovely in that way, that they sort of said, yeah, we see what you've, you know, argued here, and we buy into it, we agree with you, we accept with you, but now we want to push you and see how we can develop and enhance this, and, you know, maybe highlight some of the gaps in your arguments or some of the things that are implicit, but we want them to be explicit and, you know, fully and clearly articulated. Now, part of the issue with my thesis is that it's quite conceptually rich and quite diverse theoretically, which meant that I opened myself up for, I guess, like interrogation from multiple angles, some of which I don't know a great deal about, or some of which I'm not an expert on. And so that meant that some of these questions were really hard, and I sort of dealt with some of them well, I think, and sort of expressed how and where I think I could address maybe developing certain ideas. But others I wasn't so convinced by my answers for, and felt like I was a bit on the back foot and was a bit worried about how I was doing. But I got through the questions. They sort of came and went, and I think although maybe towards the middle I was a bit wishy-washy, I think some of the final couple of questions I was able to get back into my stride and answer them quite confidently, which I was quite happy with, sort of being able to do that. So the questioning itself, the Viva itself, lasted about an hour and 3/4, which according to colleagues that's a longer one, but didn't feel like it was a huge long Viva. At that point you're asked to step out of the room so that the examiners can deliberate, and I asked my chairperson if I could nip back down to Nathan's office just because it's a safe space, and also I'd rather just be in an office than wandering around a corridor, probably pacing with nerves. So I went down and said to Nathan, goodness, they're really pushing me here in some different areas that I've not paid a great deal of attention to in the thesis, and so I thought I was going to get majors, or even revise and resubmit, which I didn't mention in the previous video, but that's where you, well, as it sort of says on the tin, you have to revise the whole thesis and do like properly substantial work, like proper substantial rewrites, to then resubmit it, which I didn't want at all, and wasn't really emotionally ready for. Anyway, my chairperson came to grab me, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes later, so quite a short deliberation. She led me back up to the room in which my Viva took place. Nathan came with me, which was nice, but also felt a bit like taking your dad to parents' evening. And we went in, and the examiners were unanimous in that I passed my Viva with minor corrections. Those corrections being dealing with some typos and errors that they found, which I probably also found, because I found like 50, 60 plus in the end, going through my thesis chapter by chapter. And then also a bit more definitional work around some of those big concepts, those big ideas that they were really pushing me on. So a bit more with truth, some stuff with power, and some other sort of big topics, big questions that they want me to just deal with a bit more explicitly in the thesis, so that like readers can fully follow me and fully understand where I'm coming from, which I think is all fair enough, and I don't disagree with anything that they've said there. I am really pleased to have had the examiners that I've had. They were really generous with their time and their questions, and I think with their thinking too. I think they could have very easily just seen my thesis and, I've essentially proposed a whole new concept and a theory accounting for that concept, and they could have just torn it apart if they wanted to, but they didn't. And they all agreed, like some of the real strengths of my thesis, but the things that I thought were strengths of my thesis, that I did successfully conceptualize endotexts, endotextures, and endotextuality, that the diversity of the primary text that I discussed was a real boon to scholarship, and so on. And it sounds like, one examiner in particular, he stopped and he said that he's written a fully annotated sort of copy of my thesis he's going to give to me, which will include sort of, some of those like corrections for this, but also just general ideas and sort of readings I want to do further. The examiners said that, although I felt like maybe it was a bit tough at times, the Viva, they said that the sort of thesis level stuff they dealt with really quickly, and that really a lot of these big tricky questions were, if I wanted to turn this into a book, into a monograph, which is an ambition of mine, but also one that I'm aware is going to be quite tricky to achieve. So we'll see how we go there. Anyway, the clocks struck 13 on a cold, bright day in April, to paraphrase George Orwell, and at that point we concluded the conclusion. I am provisionally Dr. Liam Knight. Provisionally, that is, it'll be fully in place once I've submitted my corrections and graduated this summer, but I'm going to say doctor from now on. At that point, we went to the Pylon campus for a little debrief, a little chat, not just about me and my work, but just generally, which was really lovely. And then once my examiners and Nathan had to head off, I met up with a friend, and then some more friends, my colleagues, and had several more pints, and just, yeah, celebrated, I guess. It felt nice to be surrounded by so many great people on the day, and I'm thankful for everyone who turned up. I'm thankful for everyone else who sent me a message on the day too. So yes, I did it. I passed my PhD, minor corrections, which I think was ultimately the best I could have asked for. I am still right now quite stunned, I think. It hasn't quite set in, but I did it. Just about, maybe, but I did it. Who knows what's going to happen next?